What is going on, everyone? This is Dr. Josh Funk, and you are listening to the Strength and Knowledge Podcast.
What's up, everybody? This is Dr. Zach Baker of R2P and R2P Academy, and we have got a guest on with us today that I'm very excited for, and I'm even more excited that we were able to match up our schedules. Trying to connect with him and on different time zones is not the easiest thing, so I'm glad that we were able to get David Gray on with us today. And David, I appreciate you taking the time to make it on.
Hey, Zach, thank you very much for having me on. I'm looking forward to the chat. It looks like you guys are doing a lot of great work. So thank you for inviting me on. And I'm looking forward to getting into it with you.
Definitely. And just so people are aware, I reached out to David because we are hosting different external companies to come to Rehab to perform into the Maryland, Baltimore, D.C. area to host their courses, which David was recently in Northern Virginia doing his course. And we had multiple staff members at R2P say, hey, it would be awesome if we could get him to come out to R2P. The course would be open to the public, but it would give us an easy opportunity to register and attend for that course. So that was kind of spearheaded this initial conversation. And then I started brainstorming and said, you know what, I think there is a lot of stuff that David could bring to the table that our listeners would love to hear. So David, just to start off, do you mind giving people kind of a background of how did you even get interested and into the physical therapy space?
Yeah, of course. It's to make a very long story very short, Zach, I guess it's probably not that dissimilar to a lot of people, which was I was an athlete, and I just kept getting injured. I had chronic patellar tendinopathy. I had some Achilles issues. I had lots of hip issues, and I just struggled to really get the help that I wanted over the years. And looking back, maybe some of it was my problem, my issue, that I wasn't maybe listening to the right people, or I wasn't taking on the advice, or I wasn't resting when I needed to, or a million other things. But overall, I just felt like the care that I received over the years as an athlete wasn't as good maybe as it should be. And it just kind of forced me to start to study and look at different things and different places and different people. And that kind of led me on a slightly unorthodox route of just kind of traveling around and opening up my eyes to not just kind of traditional physiotherapy or strength and conditioning work, but I kind of went down the calisthenics world and the stretching world and the martial arts worlds and all these kind of gymnastics worlds and all these kind of places where I think you see lots of great movers, but they train in a very different way, or at least they did back then, to what you might get in a traditional physiotherapy clinic. So that kind of led me down the road, and then I ended up having to do some of my certifications and courses and stuff like that so that I could actually work with people. But ultimately it was my own injuries, my own issues that drove me down this road. And I do think that is a good place to hopefully you don't have to get injured to learn, but it is a good way to. It does help you empathize with your clients, and it forces you to learn, I think, which is quite a nice way. And you don't have to be injured, but I do think it does help to understand what it feels like to maybe play sport and struggle with your body, and even just train and try to improve. I think all of that helps when you're working with clients.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, you and I have similar backgrounds in regards to why we got in. I had a couple of ACL tears, dislocated both of my shoulders, and same thing. In the moment, I didn't know what was standard. I didn't know what was most appropriate or how you were supposed to navigate the return to sport and return to play processes. And unfortunately, all of my injuries ended up being repeat injuries. And, obviously this was several years ago, so we've learned a lot more. Surgeries have been updated, rehab processes and philosophies have been updated, and just our general understanding of what should we do and what should we demonstrate from a movement competency beyond just chronological timeframes of healing to necessitate and put somebody back on the field. But looking back on it, I do think there were just some aspects of it that there were some gaps and some holes that could have been filled. So as you mentioned, you don't have to be injured to be a good PT, just like you don't necessarily have to be a great player to be a good coach. in a given sport or activity, but there is a level of authenticity and there is a level of empathy and just some of the biopsychosocial aspects that go on with the rehab. And I like how you mentioned just your exposure to all the different worlds, the martial arts world, the gymnastics world, the stretching, the calisthenics. And I think it's very easy in the rehab world to get kind of siloed into a certain camp of, you become the mobility specialist, you become the strength specialist, or you get people who oversimplify rehab and exercise progressions, and they go down the road of, we just need to increase load, and this progressive overload, gradually get stronger, gradually get faster, which, yes, we need that. But then you get the other camp of people who become such quote unquote movement specialists that everything they do becomes this choreographed art that, that's great, but there's no reactive stimuli. And ultimately, there's no way to progress that exercise. You're just doing something very abstract that's challenging, but I don't know how you quantify it and make it any more challenging on a week-to-week basis. And as with most things, the recipe lies somewhere in the middle with that. And I think when you get exposed to different athletes, different training methods, different ways that people move and go about program design, you get more comfortable with one. When those people come in for treatment, you have an idea of what their regular routine looks like and how you may be able to supplement and fill gaps for them. But it's also a humbling moment sometimes when you realize, shoot, I've been practicing for quite a long time and I never even thought about doing something in this manner. And I think oftentimes you have to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and learn a little bit more about areas you haven't had as much experience or exposure with. So I appreciate you kind of talking about some of those different rabbit holes that you've gone down. Now, David, you don't have a traditional schedule in the sense of you work 9 to 5 and you do 40 hours of patient care. You've got your hand in kind of a variety of different things. Admittedly, I first became familiar with you just with your work in regards to the foot and ankle complex and some of your rehab methods there, which I believe is a passion of yours, a special interest, and obviously a strength and a skill of yours. But can you elaborate just on, outside of patient care, what are some of the other things that you're doing professionally, either from an educational standpoint or from a business standpoint?
Yes, I can. I think it'll probably sound a bit messy, and if it does sound messy to people, that's probably because it is, and that's our goal for 2024, to streamline things and clean things up. But every time I clean up one thing, then I have another idea, and that makes things a little bit more messy again. So, but I think that's kind of the fun part. But yeah, we have so I work with, and all of this, all the other things that I do, which I'll go into, it all did come from just having a full client list and being super duper busy and being way too busy, to be honest, which is fine for a period of time. I think just like let's say overtraining, there can be a period of overworking, but I think you only really know what's too much when you actually do it. So I think that's fine. And I did have, I was doing at one stage 12 clients a day, and my wife Kira, who was my girlfriend at the time, I remember she looked at my schedule one day and she was like, "What the hell are you doing? You don't even have a break scheduled in any of these days." So I think when you're in it, you don't really maybe notice it at the time. And that kind of forced me then to think, okay, how can I continue to make as much money? I don't want to sacrifice on the financial side of things, but I do need to start to take back my time, because I was getting a little bit, or I was getting unhealthy. I stopped training myself. I stopped looking after myself, and that can only really last so long. So we started to release a few kind of DIY programs that people can just download and do for themselves at home. And they were kind of written from an aspect of, okay, I know I can't be very specific to every single person that buys this, but there is certain qualities that I would like to develop in someone who's looking to rehab their foot or their ankle or their Achilles. And I know that could be a lot of different issues that are piled in there on top of it. So I might have plantar fasciopathy, I might have some kind of stress fracture, I might have an Achilles problem, I might have ankle sprains, but regardless, you still need to be able to do certain things with this foot and ankle. So we started to create DIY programs, which were very, very successful for different parts of the body. We have in-person clients, we have online clients, and then I have a physio that works with us that looks after a lot of online clients as well. And then we have a membership site, an educational platform that's purely for coaches and therapists. And I checked yesterday, I think we have 960 coaches and therapists in there that are learning with us, and they're all kind of short, 10, 15 minutes educational videos on different topics. And then I think the only other one is our in-person workshops. We run a weekend workshop just on the lower body at the moment, like lower limb rehab. And that's where we travel around the world and we teach that. So we have my clients, my physio, Alice's clients, our DIY programs, our educational work, which is our membership site, and then our workshop. And I think that's it for now.
That's awesome. And I loved how you talked about kind of stretching your abilities for a little bit and not truly understanding what is optimal or what is overworked or overstressed until you've actually experienced that. And we've gone through similar phases here at R2P where, we started with 2 PTs in an 800 square foot space, and we've grown to currently 9 locations with 50 PTs and 85 total employees. And we go through these phases where we are comfortable, and then we begin to grow and we begin to expand our bandwidth from an infrastructure standpoint, from a physical and mental bandwidth with the different roles and responsibilities you have. And then you kind of hit that critical mass where you realize this is not sustainable. It was necessary to optimize our current structure that we have, but this is not a long-term solution, and we need to reorganize. And whether that means adding on more PTs or adding on more locations, or just stepping back from a more aerial and macro view and saying like, hey, what is everybody really doing? And can we delineate roles in a more efficient manner? And I think, whether you're doing that in your professional life or your personal life, that is a realization that you need to reflect on every now and then, because I think especially in healthcare, we focus so much on taking care of others that at times we neglect ourselves. And I'm guilty of this. You kind of alluded to yourself being guilty of this. And if you're not making sure that you're putting yourself in a position for success on a personal level, just in regards to your own, health and quality of life, you're unable to show up consistently for others, whether that's your spouse, your kids, your clients, or your colleagues. So I'm glad you touched on that. And the other thing, you've got in-person clients, you've got online, you've got the teaching that you do, some of the DIY programs. If anybody has not had a chance to look at that, I'd highly recommend it. The information itself is very high quality in regards to the philosophy behind it, the rationale, the logic, the clinical decision-making. But I truly appreciate your ability to articulate and educate people. And I think you do a tremendous job of taking relatively complex topics and really putting them in a more palatable manner for people to digest and be able to take away with actionable items. So if people have not looked into any of those either DIY programs, the in-person courses, or the coaching, it is something I can guarantee you will take away with practical information. And David, you've had the ability, because of the way you've structured your career, you've gotten to interact with a wide variety of clinicians. Some of them local to you, others over here stateside with us and in different areas. As you've gotten to see a wide variety of clinicians, what would you say, are there any similarities that are across all PTs? Have you noticed any striking differences that are notable in regards to how either different regions or countries or people approach PT, either from their own roles and responsibilities or just general philosophy?
That's a good question, Zach. For context for people, we have been this year, so 2023, we have been in Australia. We taught 3 workshops there. We've been in Munich. We've taught in London twice. We've taught in Ireland and Northern Ireland. We've taught in Italy. We've taught in the States. And we've taught in Canada. And I think, hopefully I'm not forgetting anyone. And every single place I go to, everyone thinks that physical therapy or the strength and conditioning industry is the worst where they are, including the States. Everyone is always very negative about like, oh, my area, it's really crap. And that could be locally, like in my town, it's really crap, but in other parts of the country, it's great. So there's always this kind of feeling that the grass is greener elsewhere, and it's not. Everyone is struggling with certain things and doing well with certain things. And I think you just have to, sometimes when you look, maybe I think we're all looking online a little bit too much and starting to see maybe it sometimes brings out the worst in people, and you start to see more of the negative things than the good things. So I think overall the industry, as far as I'm concerned, is moving in a really, really good direction. And I think people are doing a really good job for the most part. Of course, there's always not good things, there's really good things, but overall I think for the most part we're moving in a good direction. I do think one thing where most people that I talk to, and now this is just of course my bias, because I'm seeing certain people who are just interested in our work, so maybe they're of a certain mindset, but one thing I do think people are struggling with is the kind of pain science, the biopsychosocial side of things. And I think that is the most important kind of body of work that's coming out, and the most important research that's coming out right now is just trying to understand the human as a whole. But that is where people are seeming to lack a lot of clarity at the moment. And there is some existential crises going on for people where they're realizing that there's like several different things can help pain, or multiple things can help pain, or there's multiple reasons why someone might be in pain or might be injured. And that's making people very confused. And I don't really think it needs to, but I think it is. So that's one thing where we're trying to get more clear on how to help people there.
It is funny. You mentioned that the grass is always greener, and I can definitely attest to that here in the U.S., whether it's PT or strength and conditioning or rehab or whatever lens or field you're in over here. I feel like we're one of the few professions that feels the need to degrade what our colleagues are doing to make ourselves look better. And it's funny. Maybe I'm just unaware of it because I'm not a physician or I'm not another healthcare provider, but like I don't hear nurses and orthopedic surgeons going around talking about how terrible their colleagues are in an effort to make themselves look better. And I do a large educational role with our company, but I also have a little bit from a business development standpoint with what we do through RTP Academy. And that's always been a pet peeve of mine is I don't like sales tactics where we talk about, hey, buy my course because all the other ones are crappy. No, it's like talk about what you do well and what value you bring and what problems you're trying to solve and go about it that way. So I'm glad to hear that. Well, I guess silver lining, I'm glad to hear that that's not unique to me, but I think I'm not glad to hear that that's a worldwide phenomenon that's happening. And I would like to see, instead of everybody trying to prove that they're the smartest person in the PT and rehab field, I wish we could all just band together and try to help elevate the floor of the profession and really say, hey, these are what we all agree on as kind of foundational universal truths, that this is what we are all going to agree on as standard practice. And on our worst day, in the most adverse environment, we are all accomplishing X, Y, and Z so that our patients are getting at least a C. And if we can give them a B or an A treatment, that's great, but they're never going to get worse than a C. And I feel like right now we've got everything from A+++ to F-, depending on where you're going and what you're interacting with. And I think some of that does come down to there isn't a lot of continuity in regards to just establishing standards. And some of that we don't have concrete objective data for what we agree on as certain tests. And I appreciate that sometimes there's just conflicting and compounding variables that may limit your ability to do research and come to those conclusions. And pain science becomes a large part of that conversation. I think as engineers and as biomechanical people in our profession, we do a really good job of understanding what motion should occur with how much force, at what rate of force development, and what physical impairments may act as a rate limiting factor to somebody demonstrating those competencies. and appreciating, hey, this is a mobility deficit, this is a strength deficit, this is an elasticity deficit, or maybe neuromuscular control. But I think sometimes we are either unaware or afraid to admit that there's other systems at play that can influence the expression of human movement and the kinematics and kinetics at play. And I think, one, just being aware that pain and other behavioral aspects can influence that, but then also taking the next step and actually trying to figure out and learn what are those different underlying systems that are at play, which ones can we readily influence versus which ones do we need to recognize and then tag in another provider that may be able to help out as well. I think that is something. I am heavy into the ACL side of things and the whole aspect of not only pain science, but neurocognitive demands and how that may express or influence the expression of movement. I'm really hoping we're able to get a little bit deeper into that side in the field in regards to our overall knowledge, and then how does that factor into clinical application?
Yeah, 100%. There's a lot to learn. And I think what I try and help people, how I try and help people who are unsure, because in some ways the pain science and the biopsychosocial stuff should make you unsure. You shouldn't be as sure as you were before that the stimulus that you're providing is working for this exact reason. But that shouldn't make you unsure that it's working at all or that it's not working. You should be able to help people move in a certain direction, especially with sports rehab. It's a very clear direction that you need to get towards. So I think people are maybe freaking out and having a bit of a crisis when they don't need to. You just don't need to be as certain about what you're saying. It's not this exact reason that it's working. It might be working for several reasons, but if it's working, it's still working, and you don't need to doubt that.
Absolutely. And there's a level of uncertainty that you need to be comfortable with and need to be comfortable operating within. And I think that level of uncertainty and that margin for error, you become more comfortable with that when you learn to control the things that you can directly influence. And when you get really good at recognizing what are the variables that we can influence, what are the best interventions or strategies at play to positively influence them, and then more importantly, are we actually selecting appropriate criteria and objective data points to validate that what we're intending to do is actually following through and happening? And then everything outside of that, that's kind of that extra that you just appreciate. I'm not sure how much X, Y, or Z is influencing it. I know it's playing a role, but it's not the predominant role in what's happening. We still are at least steering the ship. And even if we can't control the weather or the water, we can at least control how we're steering that ship.
100%. I'm going to steal that analogy.
Now, you've done a lot within your career in regards to getting into patient care, getting into the online space with patient care as well. So you have kind of that hybrid in-person versus also the online remote access. You travel around and you do in-person courses, which has been, I'm jealous. I've gotten to go to several different states. I have not gone to several different countries. So that is
you don't need to. I can't stay in Ireland. That's my problem. We can't keep doing courses in Ireland because it's not big enough.
But you've gotten to do some really cool things within your career. Is there anything that you're either currently working on, or do you have other aspirations within your career that you'd like to see either more of your time get allocated towards, or just things that you haven't tried yet that you're hoping the opportunity presents?
Good question. If you asked me that a couple of years ago, it would have been very much athlete focused and kind of team focused, which is I would love to work with XYZ athlete or in these type of sports. And maybe that was coming from an ego point of view, and I've kind of ticked that box and I've kind of scratched that itch. And I do still love working with athletes who, even they don't even have to be at the very, very top level, but you might turn on your television and see an athlete, and no matter if it's in Ireland or England or in the States or whatever, that is cool to me, because ultimately, like, the boy inside me wanted to be that. I wanted to be that athlete. And even though my genetics and several other factors would have gotten in the way, I still get a bit of a buzz from that, but I feel like I've scratched that itch a little bit at least. So I've kind of moved away from chasing that goal, and I don't need to have a badge on my crest or anything, or on my t-shirt or anything like that. So I think at the moment, it's more personal stuff at the moment, to be honest, where Kira, my wife, is pregnant and she's due in March, and I'm looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to being a dad. And hopefully, it looks like we've just gone sale agreed on a house. So I'm looking forward to that. And we're also building our new premises at the moment, or renovating our new premises. So I'm looking forward to that. So we're kind of in a period of like a little bit of uncertainty at the moment. And I'm looking forward to having a bit more certainty and a bit more just like I know where I'm going to be. We're not going to be doing as much traveling for workshops next year because I want to spend time with my kid, and I'm looking forward to having that more structure and more certainty, which this year was all over the place for us in a good way. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment. It's more moving towards the personal side of things, but we've been talking about developing like an online kind of full course, like a full mentorship type of course where we talk about like rehab for lower limb, upper limb, midline stuff, plyometrics, return to sport, all this stuff, like different modules. So that's the next big thing that we need to do, which I have been putting off for several years probably because I'm playing a little bit small, which is you have to open up your whole model to people online. And that's, even though I've kind of done that, to be honest, it's still a little bit daunting and still a little bit scary. Not because I don't feel like the information is good or I can't articulate it well, but I want to make sure that if I'm educating people on that broad a scale where it's like, okay, here's everything, here's 12 weeks of everything or as much as we can, I want to make sure it's good so that people can actually go and use it and not be confused leaving, and some confusion is fine, but not be completely confused. So that's our next big project. And yeah, I've probably just been playing small on that one, and I'm protecting myself. So I need to just go and do it, because with everything else, like all the stuff that I mentioned earlier, the products and stuff, I never had that mindset around that before. I always had a mindset of like, just do it. You'll be fine. Just do it, figure it out, and you'll be okay. And this one, I'm probably overthinking it too much. So that's our next big thing, I think.
Yeah, it always comes to mind of I'm somebody that's like paralysis by analysis, whereas Josh, who's the owner of R2P and the guy that I joined on with, he's more of the minimal viable product. Get something out there that you can stand behind, that it's a good product, but you know it's not perfect, and roll it out. Be open and honest with getting candid feedback from people and let them kind of reshape what does version 2.0 look like with that. So first off, though, congrats on the upcoming kid. You got a heck of a year ahead of you with a new house and a new kid and all the new premises that you're building out. You've got a busy year ahead of you.
Yeah, it's a busy time right now. Like everything just kind of came in all together. And well, actually, to be honest, the pregnancy news came first, and then I realized, okay, the house that we're in isn't big enough, so I need a new house. And then our premises, we had to change premises. So in some ways, it was a good thing because it just forced me to be like, okay, I actually can't waste time here. Like, bang, 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 let's get this done.
That's funny. I like to lump all of the stressful life things together at once. So I graduated PT school, bought a house, bought a car, got married, all within like 3 months of each other. And then when we had our first kid, it was also at the same time that we were starting R2P and moving and doing a variety of other things. So yeah, sometimes you need that little, that forced nudge into the next phase of life. But now I think I'm excited for everything that you have going on personally and professionally. And I do think something that I encourage, if you are a younger listener or somebody earlier in your career, you are constantly going to have an evolution of what is ideal for you. And you're going to have different phases of life that allow you different opportunities to either take on more from a work standpoint or potentially need to restructure work to fit best in with what you have going on outside. And you had talked about originally being very involved and desirable to be with the professional sports community and the higher level athletes. And that was coming out of school, that was my goal. Like, hey, I want to be in the NFL. I want to work with these people. And I've had that opportunity, not working directly with a team, but working with people in professional and college and Olympic sports. And it's fun. It's exciting. I've had colleagues of ours go on into the NBA and into Major League Baseball, and they have phenomenal jobs. They have tremendous roles, responsibilities, and experiences. I look at what they do, though, and I honestly would not be able to commit to that schedule with having the wife and the 3 kids that I do now and the type of role that I want to play with in my family. So I think it's funny. I talked about what used to always be, I want to work with this team or work with these athletes, and then I still get that opportunity, but I also work with general population. And you start to realize from a patient care standpoint, the goals and the treatments and the themes and what you're trying to accomplish, it's universal. We're managing symptoms, we're establishing expectations, we're modifying activity and making educational recommendations, we're restoring mobility, we're optimizing movement, and we're providing them with the physical ability from a strength, power, and aerobic and anaerobic conditioning. Really the only difference between your Olympic sprinter and your just recreational adult or general population is how far down each one of those buckets of need do you go? And just appreciating like when is enough, and you no longer need to get stronger. You no longer need to optimize mobility. You no longer need to nitpick the perfection of movement because it's adequate for what they need. So I would encourage people who, if you are in a more generalist role and working with traditional outpatient populations, you can still view it from a sports perspective. You're just not needing to get into the weeds as much from a program design because they don't have the training age and experience that necessitates a lot of complexity with program design. They just need a training stimulus, which for them is probably relatively basic because everything's going to be novel for them. So I love that you hit on that and just kind of the evolution of the types of clientele you've been involved with, what your kind of quote-unquote work week and work roles are involved with. And I would just encourage anybody out there who's kind of navigating their career early in their career, you just really got to be honest with yourself of what are you looking for and what is your current kind of phase of life that you're in? And is the job that you're in meeting those needs? If not, what can you do within that job? Reach out to your boss, reach out to your colleagues, see if there's other things that you can do to meet those needs. Or is it time to start reinventing kind of what your career looks like a little bit? So, David, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a very busy individual, and getting the U.S. and Ireland time zones to match up well with our schedules isn't the easiest thing. So very much appreciated for you finding the time. For those that are listening that want to just follow along or potentially connect with you either personally or through one of your courses, what's the best way for them to do that?
I think Instagram is a good place to go, Zach. David Gray Rehab is the Instagram, GREY. Just because they can go there, see my face, and have a look at some of the stuff, and they might decide they hate me, or they might decide that they're interested in learning a bit more. But that's kind of a nice place to go. And we have a podcast. It's called the DGR Podcast. And so obviously, if people are listening to podcasts, maybe they like podcasts. And I have a mix of guests and solo podcasts where I just talk about random topics. So yeah, they would be 2 good places to go, and obviously they can navigate from there. If they like me, and if they don't, they can hit the block button and never see me again. Either way, we'll both be good, I think.
That's the beauty of social media and the internet now. You are in complete control over who you are paying attention to and not paying attention to. David, exactly. I appreciate the time. Best wishes to you going into the holiday season and into 2024.
Thanks, Zach. I really appreciate you having me on, and I really enjoyed the chat. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the Strength and Knowledge Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode or have been tuned in for multiple episodes, we would love for you to subscribe, rate, and give us a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Until next time, thanks for listening.